Welcome to Real Life Manifestations. On this channel, I narrate real success stories from people who have used the law of assumption to transform their lives. What you're about to hear is one such story, shared by someone who lived with chronic health issues for over 20 years, until a single inner shift changed everything. I'm simply the narrator, bringing this experience to you so you can learn from it. Listen closely, there's a lot of truth in this one. This is not motivation. This is not theory. This is not something I read in a book and decided to explain. What you're about to hear is a real success story. Let's begin. For more than 20 years, my life was controlled by chronic health issues that doctors told me I would have forever. And yet today, I live in a body that no longer fits those diagnoses at all. Not because I fought my body, not because I forced positivity, and not because I found some miracle technique, but because I made one internal shift that changed everything. Now let me take you into this story properly. There was a time when my life was dictated entirely by my body. Not occasionally, not during flare-ups, every single day. What I could do, what I couldn't do, what I had to plan around, what I had to cancel. For over 20 years, I lived inside limitations that felt permanent. Doctors told me to lower my expectations for wellness. Friends learned which version of me they would get. And slowly, quietly, I accepted that this was just reality. What I didn't know back then was that nothing about it was final. A few months ago, I shared something online about how my life radically changed once I committed to living in the end, not as a technique, not as a visualization exercise, but as a decision about what was real. I talked about prosperity, about romance, about opportunity, and yes, about resolving more than 20 years of chronic health issues. I didn't expect what happened next. Messages poured in, people asking the same thing again and again. How did you do it, specifically with your health? This story exists to answer that fully. Before I go any further, I need to make something very clear. This story involves health, but the same principles apply to every area of life. Health is not special. Money is not special. Love is not special. Identity is not special. The law does not change depending on the subject. The law is the law. I studied and practiced the law for nearly 8 years before anything meaningful shifted in my life. 8 years of reading, listening, imagining, affirming. 8 years where the results were mostly small, inconsistent, and honestly frustrating. Parking spots, free coffee, minor conveniences. If you're in that place where you know this law is real, but you're not seeing the changes you desperately want, I understand you deeply. I lived there. The truth is, the answer was always right in front of me, but fear blinded me. Not fear of imagining, fear of my physical reality. My symptoms scared me. Diagnoses felt final. Medical language sounded authoritative, and until that fear lost its grip on me, nothing else could change. Nothing shifted until I committed fully to 2 ideas, and I mean fully, without loopholes. First, what I imagine is actual reality, not a rehearsal, not wishful thinking, not a coping mechanism, reality. And second, my physical reality, even when it screams, even when it hurts, even when it terrifies me, has no authority over what I have imagined. That was the moment everything changed. Financially, I was imagining myself wealthy, stable, expanding, confident, while physically I was more than $400,000 in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and being sued. Health-wise, I imagined myself strong, adventurous, uninhibited, proud of my body, while physically dealing with a severe autoimmune condition that had been with me for over 20 years. I want you to really hear that. My inner world and my physical world were in violent contradiction. And yet, it didn't matter. No matter how loud physical conditions bark, or even bite, they do not matter with regard to what you imagine. Physical reality only becomes your master because somewhere along the way, you agreed that it was. And if you're ever going to create the life you desire, that agreement must be broken. The law is impartial. It has no opinion. It does not care what you want or don't want. It does not test you. It does not punish you. It does not reward you. It simply reflects the story you are living internally. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. When unwanted realities persist, it's usually because part of the inner story sounds like this: I am powerless. This controls me. There's no way out. And the law, being neutral and exact, reflects that faithfully. It never asks if you're sure. It simply delivers. At some point, without realizing it, I had made physical reality my god. I treated symptoms as final, diagnoses as destiny, circumstances as law. Under that belief, imagination became fantasy instead of creation. Something nice to think about, but not something that actually mattered. Taking authority back changed everything. I stopped asking reality for permission. I stopped negotiating with circumstances. I fulfilled my desires in imagination and treated that fulfillment as the only truth that mattered. I became vigilant, uncompromising, not aggressive, not anxious, just settled. My imagined reality outranked everything else. Neville was clear about this. You cannot become the new self while indulging the old one. You cannot occupy opposing states at the same time. Illness and health cannot coexist as identities. Lack and abundance cannot coexist as self-concepts. One must die. If you're unsure which states you've been living in, look at your life. Not with judgment, with honesty. Physical reality has no authority, but it does reveal. It shows you the assumptions you've been loyal to. I was diagnosed when I was 17. Doctors told me what I wouldn't do, what I shouldn't expect, how my life would be limited. I absorbed those ideas and made them part of who I was. That identity didn't just affect my health. It affected my relationships, my finances, my confidence, my sense of freedom. Health is never isolated, and neither is your struggle. If unwanted conditions persist, it's because unwanted states persist. And at some point, you have to stop allowing them. The old self has to die, not violently, not dramatically, quietly, by starvation, by no longer feeding it attention, fear, or authority. Once I decided that my imagined reality was the real one, everything accelerated. The inner shift happened first. The outer world followed later. That's always the order. Becoming comes before experience. Pain and symptoms didn't magically disappear overnight. I didn't pretend they weren't there. I observed them. I addressed them when necessary. I sought relief when appropriate, but I stripped them of authority. Diagnoses lost their power. Timelines stopped scaring me. Prognoses became meaningless noise unless I chose to keep them alive. Wanting creates more wanting. Hopping creates more hopping. Being creates experience. I stopped trying to get to health and started being someone for whom health was normal. Techniques didn't do this. Techniques never do. States do. Techniques are just tools to help you settle into a state. If a technique feels natural, use it. If it feels forced, drop it. Effort is a sign you're trying to become instead of being. No physical action created my transformation. Becoming did. Action appeared naturally when required, without strain or urgency. And no, I am not advocating stopping medical treatment or ignoring your body. I am advocating removing its authority. Let the bridge of events unfold in whatever way feels natural. You don't need to fight the world. You just need to stop obeying it internally. You also don't need to convince anyone else. Stay quiet if necessary. Play along if needed. Let others adjust in their own time. This is your inner work, not a debate. I didn't heal anything. I became someone who was well, and when the old self disappeared, its conditions disappeared with it. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of something that feels permanent, painful, or impossible, I want you to know why this channel exists. Real-life manifestations exists to remind you that your current reality is not a life sentence. It's a reflection, and reflections can change. Persist. Persist when it feels boring. Persist when nothing seems to change. Persist when doubt whispers. You will never be the same once you move mountains from the inside. You are not here to react to reality. You are here to create it. That was a real success story, shared by someone who chose to change their inner reality before their outer world changed. I'm just the narrator, but the lesson here is universal. When you change who you are being internally, reality has no choice but to follow. As I narrate this story, I want you to understand something important. This isn't just a story to be inspired by. It's a map, and there are very clear lessons in it that you can apply to your own life, no matter what you're struggling with. The first and biggest lesson from this success story is this: nothing changed externally until the person involved made a firm internal decision about what was real. For years, they understood the law intellectually. They imagined, they visualized, they hoped, but they still treated their physical reality as the authority. Symptoms were treated as facts. Diagnoses were treated as destiny. Circumstances were treated as limits. And as long as that continued, nothing meaningful shifted. The moment they decided that imagination was reality and the physical world was only a reflection of past states, momentum began. That decision alone is something anyone listening can make right now. Another major lesson here is that persistence has nothing to do with forcing thoughts or fighting circumstances. Persistence, in this story, meant refusing to return to the identity that created the unwanted experience. It wasn't about constantly affirming or trying to feel positive. It was about quietly, steadily occupying a new sense of self, someone who was healthy, capable, free, and no longer defined by limitations. The old self wasn't fought. It was simply starved of attention. That's something many people miss. You don't destroy the old self through effort. You let it dissolve by no longer identifying with it. This story also teaches something crucial about symptoms, circumstances, and physical evidence. They were not denied. They were observed but stripped of meaning. That's a huge difference. Denial creates resistance. Observation without authority creates freedom. The person in this story didn't pretend pain didn't exist. They didn't ignore doctors or rebel against reality. They simply stopped letting those things define who they were internally. And once that authority was removed, the physical experience had no choice but to reorganize. Another lesson is about desire versus fulfillment. Wanting creates more wanting. Trying to heal creates more reasons to feel unhealed. In this story, the shift happened when the person stopped identifying as someone trying to get better and started identifying as someone who was already well. That distinction is subtle, but it's everything. The law doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to what you are being. Anyone watching this can ask themselves right now, am I living from the state of wanting or from the state of having? This success story also clears up confusion around techniques. No technique healed anything. No visualization method, affirmation, or routine had power on its own. The only thing that mattered was the state being occupied. Techniques were either enjoyable or dropped completely. That's a powerful lesson for anyone stuck wondering if they're doing it right. You already imagine all day long. The question is, who are you being while you imagine? Another important takeaway is about action. This story shows that action did not create the change, identity did. Action appeared naturally later, without force, without anxiety, without effort. That's how you know it's aligned. When you stop trying to control the how and focus on becoming internally, reality arranges the bridge of incidents for you. That applies to health, money, relationships, and everything else. There's also a deep lesson here about shame and self-blame. The person in this story realized they had created their unwanted experience, but instead of guilt, that realization brought freedom. If you created it, you can uncreate it. The law never judged. It never punished. It only reflected. That understanding alone can release years of emotional weight for someone listening right now. And maybe the most important lesson of all is this: you do not need permission to change. Not from doctors, not from circumstances, not from timelines, not from anyone else's opinion. The moment you stop outsourcing authority to the outer world and reclaim it internally, the shift begins. Quietly, invisibly, but inevitably. I'm only the narrator of this story, but the reason it's being shared on real-life manifestations is because what happened here is not rare, magical, or reserved for special people. It's the natural result of changing who you are being at the core. This story isn't meant to be admired. It's meant to be applied. And if you take even one of these lessons seriously, truly seriously, your life will not remain the same. This is real-life manifestations, where real people, real stories, and real inner shifts come together. If this story resonated with you, stay with the channel for more real-life experiences like this. Persist gently, trust the inner shift. I'll see you in the next one.